Part 13. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 121. A county princess nodded in agreement. Yes, that is to say, the prime minister values love and righteousness and is reluctant to let go of his wife who was a loser. Otherwise, Mrs. Li should have been the mistress of the house. That is, one is a lowly and vulgar merchant girl, and the other is a concubine from a famous family. Isn't it obvious who is noble and who is humble? Mother Li and her daughter were sitting in the hall, with somewhat dignified and reserved smiles on their rosy faces, and unconcealable joy and pride in their eyes. After today, she will be on an equal footing with the Yuan family, and there will no longer be a need to look at her face. Her daughter will no longer be a concubine, and her son will no longer be a concubine, but a legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's palace. With the legitimate son. After today, she will be able to interact openly with the ladies and princesses in the royal circle of the imperial capital, and she will be completely proud. Who dares to use her status as a concubine to suppress her again? A lady sitting in the hall said calmly, "It's a pity that the Prime Minister has feelings, but the wretched wife has no intention. She also gave birth to a white-eyed wolf daughter who is always against her father." "Isn't it just relying on the favor of the regent?" I said. "The regent may not necessarily have true love for her." "The regent doesn't really love me. How could it be that he really loves you?" Nan 11 walked in and looked at the madam who was speaking casually, with a sarcastic curve on her lips. "Do you want me and madam to go to the regent and ask? Let's see if he really loves me, or is he just pretending?" Because of this sudden sound, the hall instantly became quiet. All the ladies turned their heads to look at the mother and daughter who came together. After a brief silence, their faces showed embarrassment, especially Mrs. Dongping's face, who was caught talking. Hong stood up involuntarily. I didn't mean that." "Isn't that what you mean?" Nan 11 smiled faintly. "There have been a lot of rumors outside recently, and there are various versions. It just so happened that the regent was here. Why not take advantage of the presence of many powerful ladies today to let the regent make a good statement? Let's see what he likes about me. Does he want to marry me as a princess, or is he just playing tricks on me? Let's make it clear, ladies, so that we can avoid random speculations. What do you think?" The words fell slowly, and the faces of the ladies and princesses present were filled with burning embarrassment. They could hardly get off the stage. Their delicately made-up faces were covered with green and white. Miss Nan is relying on the regent's favor. As expected, she has the confidence to speak. Princess Rui, who was sitting at the front on the left, spoke slowly. She was wearing a rose-red dress embroidered with gold butterflies, which made her fair skin and cold and arrogant eyebrows. "Noble, but if you haven't walked in for a day, Miss Nan is not the regent princess. In front of me and other ladies, don't you think the tone of speaking like this is too rude?" After saying that, she turned to look at Nan 11 and Mrs. Nan. "Or do you mean that only daughters born in merchants can be raised like this?" However, when her eyes met Mrs. Nan's beautiful and delicate face, and she saw the top-quality tourmaline beads on her neck and the priceless jade earrings on her ears, Princess Rui's face froze slightly, and a bit of jealousy slipped through her eyes. As expected, he was born into a merchant family and had a lot of money. But so what? A wife who is going to be married soon should just hold on to her money for the rest of her life. Mrs. Nan did not miss the change in her expression and eyes, but she just smiled faintly and did not speak. "I am 16 years old this year, and my education and knowledge are indeed not as good as those of the princesses and ladies, so I don't know that wantonly criticizing and belittling others behind their backs is the so-called dignity and education of ladies from famous families." Nan 11 raised her lips nonchalantly. "If that's the case, then it's okay not to have such an upbringing." "You," Princess Rui stood up angrily. "Nan 11, you are too presumptuous." Nan 11 smiled lightly. "I don't dare to take it seriously." "Eldest sister, Those present today are all royal princesses. Regardless of their status, they are all elders. How can eldest sister speak like this? Nan Jiao pursed her lips and looked at Nan 11 with a look of condemnation, but he seemed to be worried about his status and did not dare to speak too directly. Besides, today is my father's birthday party, so it's not good for my eldest sister to do this. Sure enough, mothers have different upbringings, and the daughters they raise are also different. Princess Rui snorted coldly, looking at Nan 11 with cold and stern eyes. Look at Nan Xiao, and then look at you. No wonder your father doesn't like her. Prince Rui has a distinguished status and is a direct prince of the royal family. Although he is not as powerful as the regent, he is a noble family that many people can only dream of. Therefore, Princess Rui's status is almost considered the most noble here. Her words are already the most severe dissatisfaction and reprimand for ordinary girls from aristocratic families. Under normal circumstances, they are enough to make the reprimanded woman feel frightened and bow her head in apology. After all, if word spreads, the impact on the girl's family's reputation will be almost fatal. But at this time, Nan 11 didn't feel any pain and said calmly, the princess must have scolded everyone present with her words. It is said that people are divided into groups, and birds of a feather flock together. After all the clansmen, princesses, and wives can be regarded as the heads of the family. Mother, she is very happy with a concubine like Aunt Li, and even praises a concubine. I am deeply impressed by her magnanimity. As he spoke, he smiled casually. I wonder if the concubines in your princess and madam's homes are also so educated, knowledgeable, well-informed, and likable. Princess Rui's face darkened, as if she had been stepped on, and said, Nan 11. I heard that the king of Rui recently took in a beautiful and intelligent concubine. This woman is not only beautiful, but also very gentle and considerate. Nan 11 smiled lightly. With the generosity of the Princess of Rui, she will definitely get along well with the concubine. When the concubine has a son or daughter in the future, she will definitely teach her well and train her children to be outstanding people, adding glory to the king of Rui's mansion. It doesn't matter if they overshadow the legitimate daughter and son. After all, the Princess of Rui likes illegitimate daughters who are well educated and well mannered. The face of the Princess of Rui instantly turned the color of liver. The other ladies couldn't help but clench the handkerchiefs in their hands, their faces turned pale and blue, and they felt deeply offended and angry, and embarrassed for humiliating themselves. Although they didn't like Nan 11, what Nan 11 said was right. They were all married wives in a formal way. On weekdays, they didn't even bother to look at concubines. In formal occasions, concubines didn't even have the opportunity to show up. In their eyes, concubines are always lowly things that cannot be shown on the stage. They get a little favor by relying on their appearance. They have no shame. But today they took the initiative to sit with Li. Isn't it lowering their status and bringing humiliation upon themselves? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 122. Since you all like to live in the same room as concubines, my mother and I won't disturb you. Nan 11 bowed slightly. I wish you all a good time, and I would like to ask you how Aunt Li taught her daughter to steal her legitimate daughter. Style, by the way, I will ask Princess Rui for advice on how to be virtuous and generous, how to be worthy of the concubine sisters, and how to teach the concubine to become a talented person. After leaving these words, she took Mrs. Nan's hand and was about to leave. Behind her, Mrs. Li gritted her teeth and said angrily, after today, we still can't tell who is the wife and who is the concubine. Nan 11, don't get too proud too early. Nan 11 smiled lightly, then I wish my aunt in advance that she will get her wish. As soon as the mother and daughter left the lotus garden, they met the housekeeper who came in a hurry. Husband, madam. Mrs. Nan stopped and looked at him calmly. What are you doing in such a hurry? The Prime Minister invited Madam and Aunt Lee to the front hall, saying that the banquet has already begun. The housekeeper looked a little embarrassed. After all, concubines are not allowed to show their faces on formal occasions, so facing Mrs. Nan, he couldn't help but feel guilty. This is what the Prime Minister meant, and this old slave is just. It doesn't matter. Mrs. Nan smiled lightly. Go and tell Aunt Eli. Yes. Mrs. Nan didn't say anything more and walked towards Pomo Pavilion with Nan 11. 11 she spoke softly. Mom, I've thought about it carefully these past 2 days. I can't avoid what's coming. I plan to go back to Dongling to see what's going on. Nan 11 was silent. I'll go with my mother. No need. Mrs. Nan shook her head. I will go back by myself first. When you go back, I will have more worries. If I encounter trouble, I will be at a loss to deal with it. Nan 11 frowned. But if mother gets into trouble, wrong you, and I can't save the near fire. Don't underestimate mother's ability. Mrs. Nan shook her hand. Since I dare to go back, I naturally have the ability to protect myself. They can't do anything to me. After a pause, Rong Yu's power is also present in Dongling. You can rest assured that he will not stand by and watch his mother-in-law fall into danger. Ah! Nan 11 was surprised. Rong Yu also has someone in Dongling. The words stopped abruptly before she finished speaking. Nan 11 looked around to make sure the wall had ears, and then lowered her voice. Mom, what on earth is going on? How could Rong Yu in Dongling? Rong Yu. Mrs. Nan smiled. It's much better than you think, so I feel relieved to leave you to his mother. As for the future, just take it one step at a time. Take one step at a time and see one step at a time. Nan 11 was thoughtful. What her mother said about taking it one step at a time, was referring to the fact that she would go to Dongling to become the queen in the future. Nan 11 doesn't have any special thoughts on this matter. Anyway, she has identified with Rong Yu in this life. No matter how her identity changes, she can't change her emotional loyalty and cleanliness. It is impossible to have 3 wives, 4 concubines, 3 husbands, and 4 kings. It's just that Rong Yu has another identity, which is obviously beyond her expectation. She couldn't help but think, how could Rong Yu, at such a young age, have so much energy to gain influence in Dongling? Could it be that he has been plotting secretly since he was a child? There are 9 countries in the world, not every country has its own power. Pomo Pavilion was bustling with excitement at this time, but there was a bit of depression and tension in the excitement. The atmosphere was quite subtle because both the Emperor and the Regent had arrived. Today's birthday boy, Mr. Nan Xiang, is sitting in a big chair in the main hall. Although the young Emperor is the Supreme Emperor, he also lowers his body and sits in the top position on the left, while the Regent sits on the right. Although both of them gave Mr. Nan Xiang enough face, with 2 great gods sitting on one left and one on the right, the psychological pressure on everyone was really great, which was even more frightening than discussing politics in the court. Everyone only focused on pushing cups and changing cups, mingling with each other and saying some words of congratulations to the birthday boy. Others did not dare to talk at will, for fear that any word or sentence would touch a sensitive place and cause death. It wasn't until Madam is here that everyone relaxed their tense nerves and turned to look at Mrs. Nan. At this glance, everyone's faces suddenly showed surprise. Is this Mrs. Nan and the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's house? Outsiders often say that Mrs. Nan was born in a merchant family and must be very vulgar. When I met her today, I learned that this is not the case. Sure enough, words can hurt people. Yes, in front of a table, a middle-aged man with an elegant face shook his head and sighed. Mrs. Nan is clearly dignified and elegant. She is not inferior to those noble ladies from famous families. There is nothing vulgar about her. The world's people are accustomed to judging people based on their origin and family background, and are unwilling to discover the good things in others. Oh, it's really sad. Mrs. Nan tilted her head slightly, glanced at the man who spoke, and then walked to the throne as if nothing had happened, saluting the emperor and the regent. I am the Yuan clan, and I am bringing my daughter to the emperor and to the regent. Rong Chuiyun glanced at the girl following Mrs. Nan. She had bright eyes and white teeth, and she was so beautiful that she could be considered as beautiful as a woman who could conquer a country. Madam, there is no need to be polite. He retracted his gaze, picked up the wine cup on the table and took a sip. His tone was so calm that no emotion could be heard. Miss Nan, there is no need to be polite. Thank you, Your Majesty. Mrs. Nan turned to look at Nan Xingzi with a slight blessing. I congratulate the Prime Minister on his birthday. I wish the Prime Minister to have this day every year and have this day every year. Sister, are you just giving empty congratulations? Mrs. Li walked in from the outside, followed by the well-behaved Nan Xiao. Xiao went to learn embroidery for the Prime Minister's birthday today. She has been working day and night for the past 2 days and made it for the Prime Minister with her own hands. I was deeply moved by this filial piety. After all, no amount of money can buy it, right? Mrs. Nan walked to the chair next to Nan Xingzi and sat down. She smiled faintly and said, I have also carefully prepared a gift for the Prime Minister, but I will give it a try for now and bring it out later. Mrs. Li smiled and said, Sister is really good at teasing people. Everyone, please sit down. Nan Xingzi's birthday is today. He seems to be in a good mood, and his tone of voice is a little gentler than usual. My father is very touched by Jiao's thoughtfulness. Thank you for your hard work. Nan Jiao obediently lowered her eyebrows. It's all what a daughter should do, it's not hard. When everyone in the audience heard this, their expressions couldn't help but become a little subtle. Today is the Prime Minister's birthday, so it's natural for the main wife to show up, but why do the concubines and concubines also show up? Moreover, Nan Xiang spoke softly to his concubine in front of so many people, but showed little concern for his legitimate wife and legitimate daughter. It was said that the Prime Minister favored his concubines and neglected his legitimate wife, and it was indeed true. Everyone was thinking, and couldn't help but quietly look at the regent who was sitting in the chair. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 123. But he saw Rong Yu sitting leisurely on the table with an indifferent and dignified expression, holding a wine cup in his hand, as if he didn't care at all about what was happening at the table. Everyone has their own thoughts. In front of so many people, Nan Fang openly humiliated his wife, and even his legitimate daughter was shameless, but the regent seemed to be a fine person. Didn't he say that the regent liked Miss Nan in his hands? Nan 11 stood behind Mrs. Nan, looking calm, looking calmly at the happy scene of Nan Xiang and Li's mother and daughter. Bao originally wanted to come to the Prime Minister to wish him a birthday, but I didn't want him to miss school at Wool, so I asked him to study. After the family dinner in the evening, I asked him to recite the book of filial piety to the Prime Minister, so that he could always remember to be loyal to the Emperor and protect the country, be filial to your father, and be a useful person. This sentence is too nice to say, and she is simply a model of a good wife who cares for her husband and raises her children. Not only was Nan Xingzi happy to hear this, but the emperor who was sitting nearby was also happy. Some of the veterans in the court nodded their heads after hearing this, sighing that Mrs. Li was good at raising her children. Some people even felt sorry for her. It would be great if such a virtuous woman could be the head wife of Nan Xiang. A pair of children are simply a model for children from a famous family. In contrast, the head wife was born in a merchant family, had no children for so many years, only had one daughter, and had so many unpleasant things happen to her. It was really. Many elderly ministers present had their hearts tilted to one side involuntarily. Until Nan Xingzi said, "Since Mrs. Li is here, I would like to ask for a favor from the emperor during my birthday banquet today." Asking for a favor? The ministers were surprised. "What kind of favor do you ask for?" Rong Yu was stroking the wine cup, with a calm look on his face, unable to tell the emotions in his heart. Nan Xingzi stood up and bowed to the emperor. "Everyone knows that my concubine, Li, was born in a famous family. She is a woman with knowledge and good cultivation. Being a concubine really wrongs her." Li stood aside, as if she had not expected this at all, and said in surprise, "Master Xiang." Nan Xingzi patted her hand to comfort her, motioning her to calm down, and continued to say to the emperor, "It's just that I have been getting along well with the Yuan family these years, so I have never had other thoughts. But now that Li is getting older, now that I have grown up, my two children are now adults. My daughter is well educated and my son is diligent and motivated, so I want to compensate them a little bit." Mr. Xiang Ms. Li spoke softly again, her tone full of emotion, understanding, and consideration. I don't need compensation. The Prime Minister feels sorry for me, and I am already satisfied. Besides, my sister has been serving the Prime Minister's house all these years. I have put in a lot of effort, but I really don't dare to compete with my sister for credit. What I raised today has nothing to do with you." Nan Xingzi continued to reassure her, "I know you have been sensible over the years and have not fought or grabbed, but I cannot wrong you." "Can't you wrong her?" Colleagues present could not help but guess that Prime Minister Nan wanted his wife to give way to his concubine. Several complicated glances glanced at Mrs. Nan. Mrs. Nan sat on the chair, watching their affectionate performances leisurely and calmly. One was considerate, gentle, virtuous, and the other was caring, tolerant and open-minded. Tisk, what a pair of couples who were so affectionate that others envied them. "Your Majesty," Nan Xingzi knelt down and spoke sincerely, "I would like to propose Mrs. Li as my equal wife, and I ask for your Majesty's permission." The air seemed to become quiet for a moment. The ministers were a little surprised, but also felt that it was expected. After all, there must be a reason why a concubine of the Li family appeared at the main banquet, and what Nan Xingji said just now. Sure enough. Just in front of the first wife, you want to mention the concubines as equal wives? Isn't this a slap in the face of the first wife and the legitimate daughter? And this is supposed to be a private matter in the family, so why do you have to say it in front of so many people at the birthday banquet? Everyone couldn't help but glance at the regent quietly again, wanting to know his reaction to this matter. After all, Nan 11, whom he wants to marry, is the only legitimate daughter in the Prime Minister's palace. If Mrs. Li is really promoted as the equal wife today, then their mother and daughter will have the qualifications to be on an equal footing with Mrs. Nan, although the equal wife is still a head shorter than the official wife, but the difference in origin between the Yuan family and the Li family is enough to even out this gap. Moreover, Mrs. Li also has a son. In a powerful family where mother and son are valued, Mrs. Li has too many advantages. As long as the status of this common wife is mentioned today, they can guarantee that from now on, she will be the head of the Nangxiang mansion. The mistress will definitely become Li. The concubine Nanjiao also has the qualifications to be equal to the legitimate daughter. The Li family also has a son who can inherit the Prime Minister's family business. From now on, everything Nan Xiang will own will belong to his son. The Yuan family and their daughter will even lose power soon. In this case, will the regent continue to marry Nan 11? Nanqing is loyal and patriotic, sharing your worries for you, and his hard work has made great achievements. I have been thinking about how to reward him. His Majesty the Emperor finally opened his mouth, expressing his appreciation and affirmation of Mr. Li. Mr. Li is virtuous, I am very pleased that I have been able to teach my son such a sensible daughter after more than 10 years of forbearance. Now that Nanqing has brought it up, why should I not allow it? Nan 11 narrowed her eyes and couldn't help but smile. Has His Majesty the Emperor forgotten Rongyu or the regent? The regent doesn't have much time to pay attention to the minister's family affairs, but since the request has been made in front of the emperor and the regent is also present, you just treat him like nothing. But it's not for me to interfere in the affairs of the prime minister's palace. Rong Chuiyun turned to look at Mrs. Nan, who was sitting in the chair. I wonder if Madam agrees to propose Li as his equal wife. If Madam agrees, I will do it today, this lord. Everyone looked at Mrs. Nan. His Majesty the Emperor asked. Everyone understood the meaning of the sentence, so why not intervene? What if Madam agrees? In fact, since the Emperor has made this comment, who dares not to give him face? Even if Mrs. Nan is unhappy in her heart, does she dare to disagree? Li stood aside and looked at Yuan with a glint of pride in her eyes. That look clearly said, the Emperor has already spoken, does my sister have the guts to resist? Nan Jiao looked at Nan 11 and provoked silently. After today, I am also the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, who is nobler than the other. I don't quite agree. Mrs. Nan spoke calmly, but her words caused an explosion in the hall. The ministers were surprised. Nan Xingzi turned his head in surprise and anger. Li's pupils shrank. Nan Jiao also retracted her provocative eyes towards Nan 11 and looked at Yuanqi in shock. Everyone at the banquet was stunned and looked at Mrs. Nan, who was sitting on the chair in disbelief, looking graceful and luxurious. Rong Chuiyun's expression paused and his tone was dull. Madam, you don't agree. I really don't agree. Mrs. Nan seemed not to notice the shock in everyone's eyes, and said calmly, the Prime Minister wants to propose Li as his equal wife. This matter has never been discussed with me, so I don't agree. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 124. The Emperor's face darkened visibly. Nan Xingzi stared at Yuanqi angrily. His face was livid and terrifying, and his lowered voice was filled with coldness and anger. Are you crazy? In front of the Emperor, in front of so many princes and ministers, how dare she act so recklessly? Are you sincerely seeking death? Since she wants to die, he will help her. Nan Xiang's heart boiled with anger and he vowed to give her a letter of divorce once the banquet was over. I'm not crazy. Mrs. Nan smiled faintly and glanced at all the people at the table, as if she wanted to fully appreciate everyone's expressions at this time. Then, under the dull gazes of everyone, she slowly standing up, in fact, the big gift I want to give to the Prime Minister today is also related to this matter. It was so quiet at the table that you could hear a pin drop. What tricks are you trying to play again? Nan Xiang gritted his teeth. I'm warning you. Everyone knows that I come from a merchant family, I am rude and vulgar, and I smell like copper. Mrs. Nan ignored Nan Xingzi's warning and looked at the people present calmly. So today I will not imitate those famous ladies in expressing their literary talents. I just want to tell you one thing in simple words. From now on, Nan Xingji and I are no longer married. All the things in the past have gone with the wind. From now on, marriage between men and women has nothing to do with each other. As he spoke, he took out an envelope from his sleeve. This is my divorce letter to Nan Xingzi. Please bear witness. After the words fell, the anger on Nan Xingzi's face completely froze. His Majesty the Emperor's hand unconsciously loosened his grip on the teacup and looked at Mrs. Nan thoughtfully. Have you prepared a divorce letter in advance? Did she know that Nan Xingzi was going to mention Li as an equal wife today, so she used this to protest? Or was it that he originally planned to break off with Nan Xingzi and just took this opportunity to have an attack? This is ridiculous. Nan Xingzi came to his senses and was furious. Only a man in the world can write a letter of divorce to his wife. I have never heard that a woman can divorce her husband. You are simply unreasonable. You are extremely stupid. After saying that, he roared, "Come here. Madam is feeling unwell today, why don't you take her down to rest?" It is indeed ridiculous. How can a woman in the world write a letter of divorce to her husband? An old minister said coldly during the dinner. She is indeed an ignorant businesswoman who doesn't understand any rules. Oh, that's right. An old man next to him twirled his beard and sighed deeply. Just now, I thought that Mrs. Nan was graceful and generous, and she was not inferior to ordinary ladies from famous families. I didn't expect that she would have such a shocking behavior. Siang Nan also said that husband and wife are harmonious. In my opinion, Siang Nan has not divorced his wife for so many years because of his deep love for her. How can such a wife come out of the hall? Others nodded. In comparison, Li's is still good. After hearing Nan Xingzi's order, a nanny and a maid came in from outside to take away Mrs. Nan. Nan 11 smiled faintly. Who dares to touch my mother? Believe it or not, I will make your blood splatter on the spot. The air that had just regained some temperature suddenly dropped to freezing point again. The hands stretched out by Madame Chow Nan suddenly froze, and the nuns and maids looked at Nan 11 in confusion, then turned to look at Nan Xingzi, obviously waiting for his instructions. Nan Xingzi's face was already pale and dark, and if there weren't so many people there at this time, he might have overturned the table. He looked at Nan 11 like a knife. What do you want to do? Don't worry, father, I don't want to do anything. Nan 11 raised her lips and smiled casually. Today I just want to discuss some things with you. For example, I just heard someone saying that my mother's divorce from her husband shocked the world. If we use common sense, look, it does seem to be the case. Everyone looked at the Prime Minister's daughter in silence. But the world is always so unfair, blindly favoring those who hold power and blindly suppressing the weak. Is this what you call fairness and justice? Nan 11 smiled lightly, her beautiful and delicate eyebrows stained with sarcasm. Everyone knows when my father was impoverished, it was my mother who stayed with him, providing him with food and drink, providing him with money to study for exams, providing him with money to pave the way for promotion, and providing him with money to bring concubines into his house and give birth to concubines and concubines. Nan Xingzi's face turned red, feeling embarrassed and embarrassed. Nan 11. What nonsense are you talking about? My father knows whether I'm talking nonsense or not, and everyone present should also know it. Nan 11 said indifferently. So now that my father has become famous, honored his ancestors, and has power in his hands, it can be said that he has wronged Mrs. Li and wants to marry her as Ping. Wife, have you ever thought about how much you have wronged my mother over the years? She turned to look at Nan Xingzi. Outsiders say that my mother was born in a merchant family and is not good enough for you. My father thinks so too, right? So he lets outsiders slander him and never defends my mother. If today I say you are ungrateful and ungrateful, will my father think that I am treasonous? Nan Xingzi roared, shut up. I know that many people here know that my father's behavior is wrong, but you still agree. Nan 11 smiled lightly and looked at everyone with light eyes, because everyone here is actually like my father, full of benevolence, justice, and morality, but a man who steals and prostitutes himself is extremely hypocritical. These words obviously angered most of the people present, and everyone looked angry. How can you, a little girl, talk? There is absolutely no education or rules at all. No wonder Prime Minister Nan is partial. This eldest girl from the Nan family is really vulgar and makes people dislike her. I think Miss Nan is frank and speaks the truth. A man at the table took a sip of wine and said lightly, the people who are eager to get angry are probably those who are guilty of what she said. Everyone's face changed, and they turned to look at the person who spoke unkindly. The man in the black robe sat in a corner where no one noticed, drinking by himself, with an indifferent look. Most people in the world are hypocritical. 10 years of reading sage books can't make a truly righteous person. After becoming successful, they have beautiful wives and concubines, hugging them left and right. They are unkind and don't allow others to tell the truth, otherwise they are vulgar and shocking. Confucius sage books have taught you a group of hypocritical, self-deceiving, fickle villains. You. Have you made enough trouble? Wrong. You put down the teacup. His voice was neither loud nor low, but it made everyone present shudder at the same time, and no one dared to shout casually anymore. The regent hadn't said anything, and they almost forgot that there was a demon sitting in the hall. Mrs. Nan's divorce is rare, but I think it's feasible. Wrong. You said calmly, tilting his head to look at the emperor. What do you think? Rong Chiyun's face was as dark as water, and his fingers unconsciously clenched the wine cup. For the first time, he felt the anger and embarrassment of being in a dilemma. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 125. The faces of everyone at the banquet were also a bit green and white. Those holding wine cups and coughing lightly were all trying to hide their embarrassment and uneasiness. Prince Regent Nan Xingzi said while holding back his anger, "Since ancient times, there has never been a woman who divorced her husband first. Rules are meant to be broken." Nan 11 said calmly, "Although my father has never heard of it, it does not mean that he has not heard of it. There are many women as strong as my mother in the world. Just because divorce is too much, it damages a man's face, so even if it happened in ancient times, it would not necessarily be recorded in books." Nanxing knew that his anger was about to rise again. Of course, if there really was no such thing in ancient times, then I might as well let my mother set this precedent today. After Nan 11 finished speaking, she turned to look at the regent. "Your Majesty, do you think I am right?" Rong Yu nodded, "Yes." Nan Xingzi's face instantly turned the color of pig liver. Ms. Li clenched her hands tightly, not expecting that things would develop like this. Her delicately made-up face looked a bit confused, but in her heart she hated Yuan and her daughter so much that they gnashed their teeth. She thought that with the emperor's support, the Yuan family and their daughter could only compromise today. No matter how unwilling they were, they had to accept the facts and would not be stupid enough to lose the emperor's face in front of so many ministers. But she never expected that the Yuan family would actually dare to stand in front of so many civil and military courtiers, without even giving the emperor face. With the support of the regent, they were really arrogant and lawless, weren't they? If there weren't so many ministers here, if the regent hadn't been there, she would have taught Yuan Shi and Nan 11 a lesson for their words and deeds of having no respect for the king, no respect for their elders, and no distinction between superiority and inferiority. But at this time, because the regent was present, she did not dare. However, she couldn't help but speak out, because today's incident was caused by her. So after the suffocating silence lasted for a while, Ms. Li slowly loosened her palms that were clenched due to excessive force, forced a look of humility on her face, walked up to Ms. Nan, and called her sister in a low voice, "Today's incident is all because of me. It's my fault. If my sister is angry, blame me alone. Don't blame the Prime Minister. After the banquet is over, I will let my sister handle it." After the banquet is over, she must let the Prime Minister teach the mother and daughter a lesson. It is best to kick them out, or put them under house arrest and serve them according to family law, so that they know what the rules are. Yuanqi looked at her expressionlessly. Just by looking at the expression on her gritted teeth, she knew what she was thinking. She smiled faintly and said, "It has nothing to do with you that I divorce Nan Xingzi. You don't have to think too highly of yourself qualified to influence my decision." Li's face froze. "If I had really been willing to look up to you, you wouldn't have had the chance to become a concubine in the Prime Minister's mansion back then." Ms. Nan's voice was light, but there was a strong sense of coercion and coldness in her voice, "so you don't have to take yourself seriously." Thing. This sentence was like a loud slap on her face, making her feel hot and embarrassed. Ms. Li gritted her teeth and clenched her hands hanging by her sides, her sharp nails almost cutting through her delicate palms. "This bitch. Every sentence pierced her heart. Who does she think she is? The current Empress Dowager is not as annoying as she was, isn't she just a merchant girl from a humble background? Why is she so arrogant? Why does she look down on her so much? I really want to slap this bitch in the face and teach this bitch a lesson, so that she knows how high the sky is and how thick the earth is. You want to hit me? Mrs. Nan's eyes were distant and she looked at her with a bit of mockery. Ms. Lee, you can try. Lee, she came to her senses in shock, and shuddered when she saw her cold and sarcastic eyes. What are you talking about, sister? She turned pale and forced a smile. How dare sister, how dare you have such an idea? It's okay if you don't dare, Mrs. Nan said coldly, turning her eyes slightly and looking around the table. Since everyone has heard clearly, the matter about me and Nanjingzi ends here. I will take this step later. Mr. Nanjingzi and I have nothing to do with each other from now on. I will take away all the dowry belonging to me in the house. If Nanxiang is worried about me taking away other things in the house, he can send someone he trusts to watch. After a pause, I, a vulgar woman from a business background, have asked me to leave the court today. I will no longer stay in the Prime Minister's mansion to embarrass the Prime Minister. It has nothing to do with me whether the Prime Minister wants to have an equal wife or marry a second wife in the future. After saying this, she turned to look at Rong Yu. As for the little daughter 11 I will leave it to the regent. I hope the prince will take good care of her and don't let her suffer the consequences of a bitch. Everyone frowned, once again dissatisfied with Yuan's vulgar language. Whose wife would call a concubine a bitch in front of so many people? This Yuanqi is really outrageous. And if she really reconciles with Nanxiang, does she think the regent can continue to marry Nan 11? What a dream. Everyone was thinking this, but no one dared to speak freely at this time. After all, it was clear that the Prince Regent was protecting Mrs. Nan just now. No one was sure whether he would continue to protect Mrs. Nan or just sit on the sidelines. If they accidentally bumped into the muzzle of a gun, a single word from the regent could cause them to be dismissed from their posts, and the official positions they had gained over many years of hard work could be wiped out in an instant. It was unnervingly quiet. The young emperor's face was as cold as frost, and his eyes seemed to have returned to the scene that day in Fenji Palace. As soon as the regent spoke, the majesty of his emperor was gone. The word loyalty to the emperor is a joke in front of the regent Rong Yu. He doesn't have the emperor in his eyes at all. Rong Chuiyun tightened his grip on the teacup, with real murderous intent emerging in his heart. Yuanqi, stop messing around, Nanjingzi said unhappily, but his words seemed to have a taste of compromise and comfort. Just pretend I didn't say anything today, and I will never mention Li as my co-wife again, is that okay? Li's face suddenly changed. Dad, Nanjiao looked at him in disbelief, her pretty face turned pale. This is unfair to my mother. Shut up, Nanjingzi lost his gentleness and patience just now, and scolded impatiently, does your father need your consent to do anything? What is fair? Is it fair to let Yuanqi divorce him in front of so many people, take away all the gold and silver dowry in the Prime Minister's mansion, and make him lose face in front of his colleagues? Nanjiao bit her lip and glared at Nan 11 hatefully, with obvious cold resentment in her eyes. Nanjingzi, you probably misunderstood. Madame Nan glanced at him indifferently. Do you think I was angry because of Li's matter? Don't be so self-indulgent. Even if you didn't bring it up today, I was planning to divorce you. Don't say I don't have the qualifications. The money I've spent on you over the years is enough to buy your mansion and the Prime Minister's uniform. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 126. As the words fell, a biting cold wind seemed to blow through the air, and the room became deathly silent. Nanzingzi's face showed an abnormal blue-red color, as if the most embarrassing corner of his heart had been pierced, and his dignity as a man and the prime minister of a country had been severely trampled on, leaving him embarrassed and ashamed. If possible at this time, he really wanted to kill Yuanqi. Yuan family, His Majesty the young emperor spoke, with a hint of displeasure in his low tone. The great Zhou dynasty strictly prohibits buying and selling officials. Even if you have gold and silver, you can't buy the official uniforms worn by the prime minister. The emperor means that Nanzingzi took the position of prime minister based on his own strength. Mrs. Nan raised her eyebrows casually and said in a casual tone, "I admit this. But the emperor must not forget that Nanzingzi, from the beginning of his official career, I have been providing him with food and clothing. Every book he has read and every set of 4 treasures in his study have been provided by me. Without the wealth of gold and silver, I would not be able to survive. When traveling south, I don't even know which direction the imperial capital city gate opens." The corners of her lips were slightly raised, and she smiled lightly. "Can't gold and silver buy official uniforms? Why doesn't the emperor ask Nanzingzi if he can sit on the position of prime minister today without my gold and silver?" Nanzingzi's face was as cold as iron. He didn't say a word, as silent as a wooden sculpture. "Sister, don't go too far," Ms. Li gritted her teeth. "Do you have to make the prime minister lose face in front of everyone today to make you happy?" Mrs. Nan stopped giving her ums from the corners of her eyes, and just said calmly, "People must insult themselves, and others will insult them. Your prime minister's embarrassment today is basically his own fault and has nothing to do with anyone else." Li said angrily, "Sister, you..." "But I don't want to say anything more. Please continue eating and drinking, and don't get in a bad mood because of me." After saying this, she withdrew her gaze from everyone at the table, turned to Nan 11 and said, 11 I'm leaving first. You should go back to the regent's palace tonight. Mother can rest assured that Rongyu will protect you." Nan 11 hugged her mother gently and whispered in her ear, "Does mother plan to leave in this capacity?" Mrs. Nan understood what she meant and said softly, "You have to stay in Dazhu for the time being. If my mother's identity is exposed, it will not do you any good. The situation in Dongling is currently unknown. Exposing her identity will expose Nan 11's identity under the eyes of interested people. If someone takes advantage of her, it will be detrimental to both Nan 11 and Rongyu. But don't worry, your father will know my mother's identity sooner or later," Mrs. Nan said, "but by then, it's hard to say whether your father will still be as successful as he is today." Nan 11 hummed, "You must be careful when you go back and protect yourself. Rest assured." After Mrs. Nan said these 2 words, she was a little reluctant to let her go. "Choose a good and auspicious day to get married. No matter what happens in the future, at least for Dezhou, if you become the princess of the regent's palace, you will, if you can scare some people who are hostile to you and make Rongyu feel at ease, it is like giving him a status in advance." Rongyu had a good ear, so even if Mrs. Nan and Nan 11 deliberately lowered their voices, he could hear them clearly. When he heard that he was going to be given a title, the color in his eyes softened unconsciously, and he looked at Nan 11 with a deep look. Nan 11 pursed her lips and smiled, "I know." Mrs. Nan bowed to Rong Chuiyun and said, "I take my leave." Then he turned around and bowed to everyone, "My affairs have disturbed everyone today. I would like to apologize for any fault I have caused. Sir, please forgive me and take my leave." After saying that, he stepped down from the main seat and walked out step by step from the middle aisle of the 2 rows of seats. His posture was upright and noble, and his bearing was graceful. Countless pairs of eyes in the huge hall just stared in silence, waiting for the emperor to speak. They thought it was impossible for the emperor to let Mrs. Nan go so easily. After all, there had never been such a deviant woman since ancient times. Even the prime minister dared to divorce her, and she did so in front of the king of the country. It was simply shocking and disrespectful to ethics. However, the ministers did not expect that the emperor did not stop him. Is it because he was concerned about the existence of the regent? They just watched Mrs. Nan leave calmly, until Mrs. Nan's figure completely disappeared from sight, and the hall remained silent. As the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, Miss Nan, why don't you persuade your mother? Rong Chewyun raised his eyes and locked Nan 11's delicate eyebrows coldly. As a child, you should hope for harmony between your parents, Miss Nan, but it seems that he intends to promote the divorce of his parents. The emperor has wronged my daughter. Nan 11 smiled lightly, her expression neither humble nor arrogant. My daughter is not looking forward to their divorce, but supports her mother to divorce her father. This matter has nothing to do with whether they are my father and mother, because even if they let go when it comes to other people's families, my daughter-in-law is also very supportive. Rong Chewyun's eyes became colder by 3 points, and there was a faint hint of intimidation in his eyes. Why? Because my father is ungrateful, unsentimental, and ruthless. Nan 11 used 3 idioms to evaluate her father, which shows the depth of her prejudice against her biological father. Even if he is my father, I can't forgive him his betrayal of his mother. It's very upright for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. It's normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but what my father did is worthy of being called ungrateful. Nan 11 said calmly, the emperor doesn't know anything about the inner chamber of the prime minister's mansion. It would be unfair to blindly favor one's favorite minister. She might as well put her words here today. Even if the regent likes her, she is willing to marry him. But if the regent betrays her in the future, I will divorce him without hesitation. This is my attitude towards relationships. After saying this, she ignored the horrified reactions of the officials at the table and turned to look at Rong Yu, raising her eyebrows lightly and raising a soft smile on her lips. Your Majesty, do you agree with what I said? Agree. Rong Yu walked over and raised his hand to rub her head. I will not betray you, take concubines, keep extramarital affairs, or do anything you don't like, so you don't divorce me for a reason. The ministers. Are they being fed a mouthful of dog food? The lonely and arrogant regent? The dignified and indifferent regent? The unattainable regent? The ruthless regent? No, this must be a fake regent. Your Majesty. Nan 11 was a little tired and didn't want to stay here and listen to their nonsense. I'm going to see my mother. Rong Yu held her hand. I will go with you. Nan 11 nodded, yes. The two of them just walked out arm in arm as if no one else was watching. Without even saying farewell to the emperor, they just displayed their arrogance to the fullest. The author has something to say. Mrs. Nan can't reveal her identity for the time being. If the slap in the face is not enough, leave it to next time. When Nan 11's identity is revealed, I guarantee that all the babies will be extremely happy. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 127. The hall was almost dead silent. None of the ministers present dared to speak, because the emperor's face looked ugly, and his whole body seemed to be covered with a thick layer of frost, which was biting to the bone. Nan Xingzi had a stiff face, as unresponsive as a wooden sculpture. Dad, Nan Jiao said timidly, breaking the suffocating silence in the hall, I. Nan Xingzi turned his back to everyone, closed his eyes hard, and forced himself to suppress the shame, anger in his heart that he wanted to find a hole to burrow into. He turned to look at Nan Jiao and said in a dull voice, you and your mother will go down first. Nan Jiao was slightly startled and looked at him uneasily. Dad, then my mother. Is her mother's proposal to have equal wives still count? The Yuan family divorced her father. Does this mean that from now on, her mother will be in charge of the Nangxiang mansion? Will Nan 11 completely lose power in this family from now on? Nan Xingzi looked at her expressionlessly. What is your mother? Nan Jiao trembled. I. Jiao Jiao Mrs. Li came back to her senses in time and quickly held Jiao Jiao's hand to stop her from continuing. Let's go back first. With that said, he leaned towards Nan Xingzi, turned around and saluted respectfully to the emperor. I take my leave. Then he hurriedly left the main hall with Nan Xiao. Rong Chuiyun didn't speak, his eyes were staring at something in front of him without focus, his eyebrows were gloomy and cold, and he didn't know what he was thinking in his heart. If he didn't speak, no one of the ministers present dared to speak. The atmosphere was as oppressive as a tautbao, making people feel frightened and unable to breathe. Your Majesty, Nan Xingzi lifted up his robe and knelt down, lowered his head, and covered up the darkness in his eyes. I am incompetent and unable to manage the family well. Please punish me. Rong Chuiyun glanced at him expressionlessly, stood up silently, with a tall and slender figure, handsome features, but everywhere in his body was filled with suppressed anger. Go back to the palace. After saying that, he flicked his sleeves, turned around and walked out. The personal steward quickly followed with lowered eyebrows. Nan Xingzi knelt to send him off, and other ministers also quickly stood up and knelt down, but they looked much messy because of panic. I respectfully send you off to the emperor. Rong Chuiyun left the prime minister's mansion without looking back. In Ting Yuxuan's courtyard, Nan 11 asked lightly, the emperor is gone. Just left, Qingyang said in a subtle tone. The emperor's face is extremely ugly, as if a concubine in the harem had cuckolded at him. The corner of Yunyu's mouth twitched. Can you speak? Qingyang pouted. As soon as the emperor left, those ministers were probably impatient to follow him. Nan 11 smiled lightly. The prime minister's life has been unforgettable, enough for him to remember for the rest of his life. Qingyang had a strange expression. Girl, the prime minister is your biological father. What about the biological father? Nan 11 glanced at him sideways. Is it possible that I want to help him do evil? That's not true. Qingyang shook his head and said politely, but at home, you obey your father, and when you get married, you obey your husband. My father does not agree with my marrying your prince, Nan 11 said calmly. Do you think I should listen to my father? Qingyang was startled, and immediately shook his head like a rattle. No way. You can listen to other things, but you can never agree to this. Miss Nan is destined to be the mistress of the Prince Regent's house in this life. Who else can she marry if she doesn't marry the prince? Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a familiar tall figure walking over. Qingyang quickly said in a low voice, don't tell the master about not getting married. The master has finally been in a good mood these past 2 days. If the girl doesn't get married, what will happen to the master? He has returned to the cold-faced Yama. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. Is it that exaggerated? Of course there is. No one knows the temperament of his prince better than Qingyang. When he is not with Nan 11, he is as noble and ascetic as an immortal in heaven, and as cruel and ruthless as the evil god of hell. Not to mention what other people will do when they see his prince. In this way, even Qingyang, the personal bodyguard, often feels like he is in an ice cellar. It was only after Miss Nan 11 arrived at the prince's side that the prince had a normal temperature and mood. Go and tell all the ministers that I will not take mercy on anyone who dares to go out and gossip about what happened in the prime minister's mansion today. Wrong, you said indifferently. By the way, I have ordered Ling Fan to come to the prime minister's mansion immediately. One trip. Yes, Qingyang took the order and left. Nan 11 pursed her lips and smiled softly. Qingyang is always worried about the prince's marriage. Wrong, you said, if we got married earlier, he wouldn't talk so much nonsense. Nan 11 laughed. Why did the prince ask General Ling to come here? Mrs. Nan walked out of the room and smiled lightly. Let him escort me out of the imperial capital. Don't bother General Ling, I have enough people around me. Rong Yu turned his head and said in a calm tone, Ling Fan is my subordinate. Not only the emperor knows about it, but also Prime Minister Nan. Mrs. Nan was silent after hearing the words, and then nodded. She obviously understood what Rong Yu meant. Regardless of whether it was the emperor or Nan Xingzi, they suffered such a huge humiliation in public today. Although they did not dare to say anything due to the presence of the regent, they would never let it go afterwards. If Mrs. Nan leaves with her own men, Nan Xingzi will definitely send a large number of men to pursue her, and the emperor will secretly send people to keep an eye on her. Even though Mrs. Nan is fearless, she still has to deal with a lot of troubles. Ling Fan was a member of the regent. If they knew that Ling Fan was responsible for escorting Mrs. Nan, they would be wary even if they wanted to do something secretly and avoid exposing her identity. In that case, I'll trouble General Ling, Mrs. Nan said, turning to look at Nan 11, I'll leave in the afternoon, 11 ER, after General Ling comes, you can go back to the regent's mansion with the prince directly. You don't need to stay here. Bear your father's accusation and anger and live a good life with the prince. This is no longer your home. If nothing happens, don't come back. I know, Mom doesn't have to worry about me. Nan 11 smiled, stepped forward and hugged her mother, but Mom must protect herself on the road. Mrs. Nan patted her shoulder, don't worry. How much is my mother's dowry? Nan 11 asked, do you need Rong Yu to help you prepare a few more carriages? How can I have any dowry? Mrs. Nan shook her head, when I married your father, the shops and property on hand were my dowry, but they couldn't be moved into the Prime Minister's house. I didn't buy much gold and silver jewelry, so I couldn't store much. Box, since you said last time that you don't have to let Li and her daughter take whatever they want, I don't even have any cash left. I mainly have banknotes in my hand, which is easy to carry. After a pause, your father, in order to maintain a good reputation of being honest, the Prime Minister's mansion has not had any other source of income in these years except salary. I have provided daily expenses. I would like to see it after I leave. How should he maintain the reputation of the Prime Minister's mansion after that? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 128. Nan 11 was silent. Her parents turned against each other, and they have become strangers ever since. As a daughter, she is probably one of the few who can be as calm as she is. If she hadn't experienced betrayal and plotting in her previous life, and just because she was Nan Xingzi's daughter, she might not have been able to be too cruel. She might even have persuaded her mother to be more generous and not to be too harsh with her father. Calculate. But she experienced a miserable life. No one knows better than her how ruthless and callous people like her father and Gu Qingshu are. They always care only about their own interests, not whether the contributions of others to them are worth cherishing. When there is use value, they will patiently maintain the illusion of affection, and their gentle words will move people. Once the use value is gone, or when they have got what they want, they will be gone in an instant. They will show a shameless face, and they don't even mind letting people see their hypocrisy and insidiousness. Her father was like this, and so was Gu Qingshu. So there is nothing to sympathize with. Mrs. Nan kept her promise. Apart from leaving the land deed, shop, and a whole box of banknotes to Nan 11, she actually didn't leave even a tael of silver to the Prime Minister's mansion. This is my shop in the imperial capital. I will hand it over to you from now on, and the manager and shopkeeper will listen to you from now on. Mrs. Nan sighed softly, if you have to leave here in the future, all these shops can be transferred to others, or you can keep them and arrange for a reliable person to help take care of them. These are prosperous shops and they earn a lot of money every year. It would be a pity to transfer them. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Don't you need any money when you go back? Mrs. Nan raised her eyebrows. You mean that I need money to go back to Dongling to manage relationships and plan my power? Nan 11 nodded. No need. Mrs. Nan shook her head. Don't forget that I am the eldest princess of Dongling. I went back to Dongling to enjoy the glory and wealth. If I want to spend my money on it myself, then why should I go back? Nan 11 was slightly stunned, but was immediately impressed by her mother's domineering attitude. Well, with her mother's temperament and confidence, she shouldn't suffer any loss. But what her mother said was right. Although Fukin was the only one who invited her mother back on behalf of the Dongling royal family this time, it could be judged that everyone in the Dongling royal family, including His Majesty the Emperor, was indeed looking forward to her mother's return. Although looking forward to going back does not necessarily mean a sincere welcome, it is clear that she wants to give her mother face. Thinking about it like this, Nan 11 suddenly felt a little more confident. The mother and daughter stayed in Tingyukshuan, chatting and packing their things. When Ling Fan was ordered to arrive at the Prime Minister's mansion, Mrs. Nan had already packed the clothes and luggage that needed to be carried, and several muscular guards were loading the bags and boxes into the carriage. Mrs. Nan and Nan 11 walked out of Tingyukshuan. Sister Ms. Lee came over with someone, her eyes showing condemnation. My Prime Minister has been working so hard for this family. Even if my sister is dissatisfied, how can she let the Prime Minister do it in front of so many people? Can't you come to the stage? Mrs. Nan raised her eyebrows, feeling that this woman was seriously ill. She looked at Mr. Lee expressionlessly, and her tone was flat and mocking. My aunt has divorced Nan Xingzi, why do you still care about his face? His face is made of gold. Lee was shocked. Sister. Don't keep calling sister one after another. People will think you have a good relationship with me. Mrs. Nan looked past Lee and watched the guards busy coming and going, but she still had some free time to talk to her. A few words. Nan Xingzi will only be your husband from now on. Whether you want to be a regular wife or a common wife, it has nothing to do with me. Even if Nan Xingzi wants to take a concubine, it is your husband and wife's business. You should be happy. So happy. Lee, she secretly hated her, but she had to raise a fake smile on her face. Sister, are you really planning to leave the Prime Minister's mansion? As the saying goes, a couple's love lasts for 100 days. After all, my sister and the Prime Minister have been husband and wife for more than 10 years. It's awkward. Forget it. What couple doesn't quarrel at the end of the bed? Does my sister really want to abandon the Prime Minister? Mrs. Nan said calmly, do you think I'm pretending to scare him? Of course Mrs. Lee could see that she wasn't trying to scare anyone. The incident she made in front of everyone today has already caused the Prime Minister to lose his face. The relationship between husband and wife is completely broken. Even if she does not leave, it will be difficult to survive in the Prime Minister's house in the future. Of course, Ms. Lee didn't really care about her going or staying. What she cared about was what Mrs. Nan would take away. Turning to look at the things in the guard's hands, she hesitated for a moment, and finally said tentatively, it's impossible for my sister to really empty out the Prime Minister's mansion, right? Evacuate the Prime Minister's mansion. Mrs. Nan smiled lightly, you think too highly of me. How capable am I to evacuate the Prime Minister's mansion? Every brick and tile in this huge mansion was given by the Emperor. The flowers, plants, and trees, I can't take them away either. The rock garden, corridors, and pavilions will all be yours from now on, including the keys to the warehouse. Don't worry, I won't take away anything that belongs to the Prime Minister's mansion. Nan 11 almost laughed out loud. Her mother is really evil. She can't take away the flowers, trees, or rockery gardens. Well, it's true that she can't take them away. After all, these things belong to the Prime Minister's mansion. Otherwise, she has to take them all away even if she digs 3 feet into the ground. Not a single brick or tile is left to them. Ms. Lee felt angry, but she endured it for the sake of the money. She bit her lip and said, how much money is there in the warehouse? Are you asking me this question? Mrs. Nan looked at her as if she were an idiot, but yes, I have been in charge of the central bank for so many years. Before I leave, I should explain to you that there is no money in the warehouse. However, there are still a few pieces of silk and satin that the emperor once gifted to the prime minister's palace, as well as a few antiques and jades. If you think you can exchange them for silver, you can have them exchanged. These things will be your decision in the future. Nan 11 nodded secretly. Li's face turned livid with anger. How can you exchange the things given by the emperor for money? Do you think we don't die fast enough? Mrs. Nan looked at her and said in a calm voice, I just made a suggestion. If you think it is feasible, go for it. If you think it is not feasible, don't listen to me. I put a knife on your neck. Mrs. Li gritted her teeth. If you take away all the money, how will we live in the future? That's your business, Mrs. Nan said. I no longer have anything to do with Nan Xingzi. Is it possible that I will continue to use money to subsidize him and his concubines? Mrs. Li's face turned green and white, and she gritted her teeth. My sister has been married to the Prime Minister for so many years and has enjoyed the glory of the Prime Minister's house. Do you think it's appropriate to take away all the money in this divorce? Mrs. Nan looked at her in surprise, obviously not expecting a person to be so shameless. You want me to leave the dowry to you? The author has something to say. Night owls, go to bed early. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 129. Li didn't say anything, but her expression showed that. Madame Nan was silent. She had probably never seen such a shameless person before, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. General Ling is already waiting outside, Nan 11 said lightly. Mother, let's not waste time. Madame Nan nodded. Let's go. The mother and daughter walked away as if no one was around. Li's face changed slightly, and she subconsciously wanted to stop them, but was blocked by Yin Yu and Yin Shuang. What are you doing? Li glared at them. Get out of the way. Yin Yu smiled lightly. Madame Li, don't be so shameless. Isn't it said that you come from a famous family? Don't be greedy for property that doesn't belong to you. This is the most basic upbringing you should have, otherwise it will only make people look down on you even more. Nan 11 listened to Yin Yu's words, and a happy smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. What's the connection? Li knew who the Prime Minister's mansion relied on for food, clothing, and expenses over the years. As soon as her mother left today, the huge Prime Minister's mansion would be stretched to the limit. Li could naturally take charge of the inner house, but what was the use of holding an empty warehouse in her hands? Can it make her worry-free about food and clothing, or can it make her spend money without restraint? Neither. In the future, the Prime Minister's mansion will have to make money, or the Prime Minister will give up his face and reputation and start using his power to make money. However, making money is not so easy. The current emperor can turn a blind eye, but the regent will not. So her father should just pray for himself. The mother and daughter walked to the front door of the Prime Minister's mansion, but suddenly a cold voice came from behind. Yuanqi. Madame Nan and Nan 11 stopped at the same time and turned to look at Nan Xingzi, who came out of the open hall. The Prime Minister, who had worn a brand new robe especially for today's birthday, came over with a sullen face. His face had returned to calm, or rather, it was a calmness that was too weak to struggle after the rage, with a bit of abnormal paleness in the calmness. He walked to a distance and stood still, Staring at Madame Nan with a heavy gaze, "Are you determined to fight to the death with me?" "Fish to the death and net to the death," Madame Nan smiled faintly, with a smile that showed indifference. "What the Prime Minister said is not quite appropriate. How can it be called fish to the death and net to the death? Clearly, the fish is not dead, and the net is not broken. Didn't you always want to divorce me, bring Lou from outside into the mansion, and promote Lee from the mansion? Today I took the initiative to fulfill your wish. You should be happy." Nan Xingzi's face, which had just calmed down, turned dark and gloomy again. Madame Nan seemed not to notice, and mocked calmly, "From now on, there will be no wife like me who comes from a merchant family and smells of money to embarrass you. The Prime Minister will also be more glorious when he goes out. He can stand up straight with his beautiful wife and concubines around him. He doesn't have to worry about people saying that you married a merchant girl. Isn't this a good thing?" Nan Xingzi clenched his hands tightly, his face was full of clouds. "You are really willing to give up our years of husband and wife?" "Years of husband and wife," Madame Nan laughed lightly. "Is the Prime Minister trying to keep me?" A trace of embarrassment flashed across Nan Xingzi's face. "It's better to part ways in peace, and each of us can still maintain the most basic decency." Madame Nan smiled lightly. "Before leaving this door, I am still Madame Nan. I would like to take advantage of today's good day to wish the Prime Minister good fortune and longevity." "Good fortune and longevity?" Nan Xingzi could take this sentence as a blessing at any time, but at this moment, it was a clear irony. Since the Prime Minister mentioned the years of love between husband and wife, then all the unhappiness I brought to the Prime Minister today should be regarded as my return to the Prime Minister for the love between husband and wife for more than 10 years, and it is worth our marriage," Madame Nan said calmly. "After stepping out of this gate, I will no longer have any relationship with the Nan mansion. Prime Minister, take care of yourself." As she said this, she bowed nonchalantly and turned to walk out. Nan Xingzi did not say anything, just watched her leave expressionlessly, with a sinister and cold look in his eyes, like a sign of the coming storm. When Madame Nan stepped on the stool to get into the car, she saw his expression from the corner of her eyes, but she just pulled the corner of her mouth slightly, said nothing, and turned to Nan 11 and said, "Write to you when I'm settled." Nan 11 nodded, "Be careful on the way." "Don't worry," she smiled, "Mother knows how to protect herself." Rong Yu came over, stood beside Nan 11, and ordered lightly, "Send Madam safely. If you meet someone who is looking for trouble on the way, no matter who it is, don't be soft-hearted." "Yes," Ling Fan responded respectfully, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, I will definitely protect Madam." Looking up at Nan 11, he said, "Don't worry, Miss Nan." Nan 11 said politely, "General Ling has worked hard on this journey. It's not hard for me to do what I should do." In front of Rong Yu, Ling Fan behaved very well, and he was completely different from the cold and upright when he reprimanded Nan 11 in the study room before. The study room is a restricted area. How can a woman enter without permission? Nan 11 knew what was going on, but she smiled gently. The luggage and belongings have all been loaded onto the carriages in front, and the guards are on standby. The mighty procession looks like a long dragon. In addition to Ling Fan and the private soldiers of the Prince Regent's palace who escorted them, there are dozens of unfamiliar faces in the team. They are all agile and expressionless, and their momentum is no less than that of the private soldiers of the Prince Regent's palace. They are Madame Nan's own private guards. They have never shown their faces before, but they showed up today to protect their master. This is also the reason why Nan Xingzi was furious but dared not let anyone stop him. Even the most stupid people could see that he could not stop the scene, and the regent personally sent someone to escort him. How powerful is the Prime Minister's mansion to stop them? Madame Nan, oh no, Princess Xianyuan 11 of Dongling got into the carriage, lifted the curtain and waved goodbye to Nan 11. Nan 11 and Rong Yu stood on the bluestone road outside the gate, watching the carriage team slowly drive away from their sight, getting farther and farther away. The 16-year relationship between husband and wife ended here. Prime Minister, Li turned to look at Nanxingzi as if she had just woken up from a dream, and said hesitantly, just let her go. Then what should we do in the future? What about the expenses of the mansion? Nanxingzi's face was gloomy, and he looked at the figures of Nan 11 and Rong Yu outside the door expressionlessly, and coldly left with a wave of his sleeves. Li bit her lip and couldn't help stamping her feet. She looked at Nan 11 outside the gate with hatred, turned around and left in annoyance. Regent, a carriage came from the direction of the palace, and a white-faced and bearded eunuch got off the carriage. He knelt down and showed courtesy, then spoke carefully, "Your Highness, the Queen Mother summoned Miss Nan, please come to the palace immediately. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 130. Called by the Queen Mother? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows slightly. His Majesty the Emperor had just returned to the palace filled with anger. Now the Queen Mother summoned her to the palace? How impatient is this? Go back and tell the Queen Mother that Miss Nan is not free today. Rong Yu held Nan 11's hand and glanced at the chamberlain from Xi'an Palace indifferently, then turned to look at Nan 11, "I was frightened in the mansion just now, let's go back to the palace first." Nan 11 smiled slightly, "Listen to the prince." The chamberlain's face changed slightly, he looked up at Nan 11, and couldn't help but remind her in a deep voice, "Miss Nan, this is the Queen Mother's decree." Nan 11 turned to look at him, with a look of embarrassment on her face, "But you heard just now that the regent said that I was not free. What do you think we should do?" It was obvious that even the chamberlains around the Queen Mother, no matter how majestic they were on weekdays, did not have much courage in front of the regent. Hearing Nan 11's words, the chamberlain's face paled slightly and he spoke in a low voice, "The Queen Mother's decree will not allow anyone to disobey it. Please also ask the Prince Regent not to make things difficult for your servants." This time, Rong Yu didn't even give him any charity out of the corner of his eye. He held Nan 11's hand and led her away. The chamberlain watched the two people leave, his face turning blue and white, but he didn't dare to say another word. After getting on the carriage and returning to the palace, Rong Yu immediately ordered people to find the most famous matchmaker in the capital. He asked Yunyu and the housekeeper to discuss the marriage process with the matchmaker, choose the nearest auspicious day, and get the wedding done as soon as possible. Although the marriage contract between two people does not require the order of parents or the words of a matchmaker, the necessary procedures are still necessary. It takes time to customize Feng Guanzai API. If you are in a hurry, you may not be able to make it in time. Don't worry about this, Yunyu told the matchmaker, the prince has already prepared the phoenix crowns and jewelry in advance. You don't need to think about it. You are only responsible for preparing the marriage process and getting everything done in the shortest possible time. Just prepare all the details. Yunyu was responsible for discussing the marriage with the matchmaker, while Nan 11 followed Rong Yu back to Zhaochen Hall in silence, saying nothing all the way. Arriving at Zhaochen Hall, the two of them climbed up the steps. Rong Yu turned his head and looked at her silently, unhappy. Nan 11 came back to her senses, looked up at him, slowly shook her head and smiled, "I feel a little sad, now that my mother is gone, maybe I won't be able to see her again for a long time." "No," Rong Yu said calmly, "before your 16th birthday, someone from the Dongling royal family should come to take you back." 16th birthday? Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Yes, her birthday was in the 12th lunar month, that is, she would not be truly 16 until the end of this year. But why would they take me back before my 16th birthday? Nan 11 frowned. "If so, wouldn't I have to separate from you? It's a long way from Dazhu to Dongling, and it would be a waste of time to go back and forth." "Duo, I don't want to be separated from you." Rong Yu was delighted by her words, and the soft light in her eyes almost overflowed. "I'll go back with you." "Ah." Nan 11's right foot paused slightly as she was about to step into the palace door, and she looked at him in surprise. It's not too far from Dezhou to Dongling. Let's just go there for fun. Don't be too anxious on the way. Rongyu rubbed her head. It's still early, don't think about this yet, I will make arrangements. Nan 11 nodded and couldn't help but return to the previous question, why did they come to pick me up before I turned 16? Because the prince chosen by the gods of Dongling must ascend the throne as the emperor on the day after his 16th birthday. Rongyu said calmly, the prince chosen by the gods refers to the queen who happens once every 200 years. Becoming emperor at the age of 16? Nan 11 was stunned, and then raised her hand to rub her eyebrows. I still don't feel anything at all. It's as if the queen chosen by the priesthood has nothing to do with me. I'm like a bystander who has nothing to do with her, and I'm incompatible with her. Rongyu looked at her silently, with an incomprehensible luster surging in his deep eyes, and his noble and indifferent eyebrows seemed to be covered with a thin layer of hazy clouds, making it difficult for people to see clearly. Nan 11 walked to the carved brocade couch in front of the window and sat down. The maid made tea and brought it over. She poured a cup for Nan 11 and then respectfully stepped back and stood far away. Do you have any special requirements about getting married? Rongyu sat down next to Nan 11, held her on his lap, and buried his head on the side of her neck. I asked Yunyu to discuss the details of the marriage with the matchmaker. If you have anything you want, tell Yunyu and let them prepare together. There are no special requirements. Getting married is just a ceremony. The process of the ceremony is not important, what is important is the result. Nan 11 tilted her head and kissed the corner of Rongyu's lips. When we get married, we can enjoy it every day. The prince no longer has to watch and eat the joy of fish and water. Rongyu's expression paused, and he looked at Nan 11 with a subtle look, and was speechless for a moment. Why doesn't the prince speak? Nan 11 raised her lips and looked at him with a smile, her clear eyes shining like stars. Are my words too strong and scared the prince? No. Rongyu slowly shook his head, the arms around her waist tightened involuntarily, and there was a bit of a low and seductive tone in his voice. You are right, when we get married, you can enjoy the pleasure of fish and water openly without having to watch or eat. The joy of fish and water is not important. But after they got married, she truly belonged to him alone, from body to heart, from the inside out. No one could take her away from him, and no one could tear her apart. This girl will only belong to him from now on, she must belong to him. In this life, the two of them will never be separated until they grow old together. Rongyu closed her eyes slightly, her nose lingering with the fragrance that belonged to her, and her long empty heart was filled to the brim, as if it had never been fuller and more satisfying. Let's set the date in 3 days, Rongyu said in a low voice, there's no need to wait too long. Anyway, marry early or marry late. He hoped that she would become his as soon as possible, his legitimate wife, and his princess. Your Majesty, it's up to me. Nan 11 didn't have any objections. I don't plan to go back to the Prime Minister's house. The shop my mother left for me, on the day of the wedding, I will go to the shop to dress up and get married, and bring a few extra dowries. The girl has made up for some regrets, and any other shortcomings can be made up by ostentation and dowry. But when it came to the dowry girls, Nan 11 thought of the 2 girls who were still in Jinlan Garden, and said calmly, let Yin's Huang go to the Prime Minister's house later to bring Juxiang, Haitang, Aman, Akyu, Axu, Abing and the others have taken it over, and if they continue to stay in the Prime Minister's mansion, I'm afraid that Li will bear a grudge and abuse them in the future. The author has something to say. Good night, babies. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.